Alright, before I get into the next subject, I also want to clear up one thing which I said in my last video, where I said you'll be feeling anger down there, you'll be feeling sloth down over here, you'll be feeling gluttony as a pure emotion. That's just half right. What I should have said instead is anger is like an overwhelming sensation which will originate, but then it'll have to activate sentiment and judgment. So that's the only way you'll be feeling wrath, is when that sensation is so overwhelming that it kind of overtakes your whole body. So you're not just feeling it down there. That's why it's like a whole body kind of feeling. You get an angry heart and also like an angry mind, right? And then same thing for sloth, where it would be coming from a thought, but it would be a thought inspiring an emotion, you see, and a thought inspiring a feeling. So it's an overwhelming thought, which would be all three of these. And then also for emotion, it would be gluttony, which is the overwhelming emotion which would inspire a feeling and also inspire a thought. But yet, essentially, it does originate from here, but it's not just this, which is kind of what I got wrong. And that's why gluttony, slothiness, and wrath are kind of like these overwhelming things, you know? And like, sort of, I guess, pride and stuff, where it would just be this or just be that. Okay, so God, the Father, the Creator who we worship, he was first. And from him came his creation to the angels, which came before humans, right? And then all these religious books and stuff. And then he separately created man, three. However, what's going on here is that in the Quran especially, it mentions how he used clay and, you know, like all these other things, like sand, I think. So he'd had to have created something and then also created that creation out of that something. But also, it mentions how he like breathed his soul into us or something like that. So he did also just give us directly him. But so there's God the Father, the Creator. There's kind of the creation of his, number two, which is the angels. And then there's number three, which is us, his final creation, right? As they say, which is a mix of him creating us through himself and also through what he has already created. And that's what we're going on here. Where over here, I'll draw that, because over here you can see there's like a little hole here, which kind of includes everything, okay? And right here I'm going to draw a 0. And I'll show you what the properties mean today. Oh my god, that was so good. There's a 0 right here. So if this in the middle is 0, then I'm going to just draw out what I just said of right here, 1, the Father, creating 2. And then also creating 3. And 2 giving to 3. And that is kind of what we have here. Where feelings come first. They create a thought, and then an emotion is just a mix of feeling and thought, right? If you actually think of what an emotion is, it's like a mix of a feeling and a thought, like a perfect balance. And you can even draw more inside of it. This is where it'll get a bit complicated, so bear with me here. And you'll see there's 3 rings. What I've just drawn here was what we were discussing last episode of the relationship in the grander scheme of things between life, soul, and mind, between these 3 rings, each interplaying within each other. But as you can see, these rings are also independent rings. So there's a ring for the feelings, which would just be sensation, sentiment, and judgment. Right here, as you can see. Let's draw that. Sorry, my drawing isn't the best, but right now we have the red ring of sensation, sentiment, and judgment. And over here we have the blue ring. It should be equal proportions, but you know, of instinct, intuition, and induction. And finally, we have the yellow ring of contemplation, sympathy, and conscious. And within these, they each have their own properties. So since the red ring is indicative of the Father, the One, the feeling, right here what we're going to do is, and yeah, there's more triangles within the triangle, I know. We're going to draw the One. So a sensation would play the role of the Father, and the role of the Father, the way it goes, the properties of 1 is the 1 will give to the 3, so the 3 within the 1, which is right here, sentiment, and then the 1 will also give to the 2, which is of judgment, and the sentiment will give to the judgment, the 1 will also give to the judgment. Okay. Now we have over here the properties of the angel or of the sun, where we have 1, which is instinct, giving to 2, which is induction, and then we also have intuition, which is 3, giving to 1 and giving to 2. So I'll draw it out on a larger scale later. Don't worry about the arrows too much right now if you're confused. This is the role of 2. And finally, what we have is the Holy Spirit of 1, which would be sympathy, giving to 2, which would be consciousness, and then 2 giving to 3, which is contemplation, and 3 giving back to 1. So it's kind of this loop. The reason I want to show you the properties on a larger scale is now because the body isn't indicative of the entire universe, right? Our feelings, our thoughts, emotions. So what's going on here is we are in the middle associating with the properties. Let's say if we associate with the properties of the Father, what would happen here is now we're going to have to draw it on the larger scale where all 3 of them are kind of interacting with each other. So this goes back to being 1, and this goes back to being 2, and this goes back to being 3, even though this is 1 in the middle. Precisely because this is 1 in the middle. So now what would be is we'd be having sentiments, right? We'd be having judgments, and we'd be activating consciousness if we associate with 1, the Father, and we take on those properties. And now what we'll have is, if we don't do that, damn, I should have drawn that later. Okay, anyways, if we associate with 2, the angel, it'll be a sensation giving, a feeling giving to a thought, right here. So judgment, it'll be a feeling, not that, it'll be the other way around. And then it'll be an emotion giving to a feeling, sympathy, and it'll be an emotion giving to a thought, consciousness, nice arrow, consciousness, that would be 2. Finally, and this is where my point kind of goes to prove and show, is if we give 3, if we get 3, it would be a feeling giving to a thought, you'd activate your judgment, a thought giving to an emotion, you'd activate your intuition, and then finally an emotion giving back to a feeling, so you'd activate your sympathy. And here's where it gets pretty insane, right? Because why does this all matter? If you go to the chakras, if you were to associate with 1 and 2 and do that, or assimilate with those properties, you can do it, and you can see that certain chakras would be missing, or wouldn't be activated, and others would be too much activated, because if you're activating judgment and sentiment at the same time, then this one's going to be kind of over. Anyways, but when you assimilate with 3, what you have over here is a perfect balance and activation of all 7 chakras. Let's go through it. So let's draw it out from the root to the crown over here. What you'd be activating is this, and then through sentiment through the back of this. Remember, since it's through the spine, it wouldn't be activating your heart though. And it's now going to activate your conscious chakra, sentiment conscious, and then end up at the crown. And after that, what do we have next after judgment? We're going to be activating contemplation, or we're going to be creating an emotion through intuition. The intuition chakra, which we discussed last video, all these chakras we discussed last video, right? Contemplation chakra would be ending here through intuition, would be activated at the heart. And then finally, sympathy, which is the only one left, the solar plexus chakra, would now loop back around to the root, because now it's going heart to root. So what we've done here is we just activated all of the chakras through this kind of line of this and then from here to here, and then from here back to here, and then it's going to loop around. And this is kind of proof that we are 3 within the properties, I guess.